Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Kate, and if you're new to the channel, you may not have noticed my wrist before. What do I mean by that? So sometimes when I'm streaming or in videos, if I adjust my hair or I rub my nose or I reach for something, sometimes people will ask, "Oh, what happened to your wrist? Why do you have that scar? What's on that arm? Like, what's going on with you?" And actually, the wrist stuff has kind of been the catalyst to what has caused me to stream all the time and what has made me kind of shift jobs, shift priorities, etc., etc. So let's just get into it, shall we? So this kind of dates back a little while ago. Before I was streaming, before I was doing any stuff on YouTube, I was a full-time massage therapist. So I graduated in 2013, and then around 2015 I was having a lot of wrist pain, and I thought it was a tendonitis, and I was like, "Uh-oh, let's go get it imaged." So I put it off actually for a really good while, went and got an x-ray, and the x-ray tech was like, "Oh, you have to go get an MRI." And I was like, okay. So went for my MRI, got my results back, and the doctor said, "Yeah, you have a bone tumor in your wrist." So what I was actually diagnosed with is called a giant cell tumor. And a giant cell tumor is a rare, aggressive, non-cancerous tumor that develops near the joint ends in bone. Most commonly are the long bones of the arms and legs, and they often occur in young adults when the skeletal bone is complete. So the exact cause is kind of idiopathic, kind of still very unknown. However, that was my diagnosis. So at that time, the surgeon gave me a couple options, and the option that I went with was a bone graft, where they would essentially carve out all of the diseased bone, all of the giant cell tumor itself, and pack it up with healthy bone or cadaver or whatever kind of stuff that they had available, whatever those doctors do. So that was the route that I went. It was less aggressive. Technically, I would be off work for less time, and the recovery seemed pretty quick, pretty easy. So I did that, and I ended up taking about 5 months off of massage. And at the time, I thought that was insane. I thought that was insanity. And here I am in a whole other career now. But, anyways, so that was 2015. So after 2015, I went back to massaging after my 5 months off and really didn't have much issue. I could bend my wrist, everything felt good, I had no pain. And then about 2 years ago, I started getting some achings in the wrist again. And like achiness, some soreness, some movements really didn't feel very nice. And in the back of my head, I was like, this is kind of how it felt when I had my first issues, when I first had my surgery, and I'm not entirely sure if I should be worried or not. So, with the graft, I had a 20% chance of reoccurrence, which now that I think about it is a very high chance of reoccurrence. I just wanted the least invasive procedure with the fastest recovery time. And so when I completed my surgery and recovered, every year I would go back for x-rays. So I would go to my doctor, ask, "Hey, I am just getting a checkup done," and then I would get an x-ray done. And I had that done every year. And then, like I said, 2 years ago, I was having some pains. So I said, "Hey, you know what? Like, I'm going to go in early." And I went in and they said, "Yeah, everything looks fine." Oh, okay, perfect. Kept massaging, kept working. At this point, I was with a new clinic that I loved, was very open with my boss, let her know. She offered, "Oh, you can cut your hours down, you can, be selective, things like that." So that was really, really helpful, but I still was having pain with like basic movements. I might insert some footage here and there so that we can kind of see together what hurt. Starting with the right wrist, obviously. As you can see, there's a larger, much larger bumpy from this angle. This is painful for the left side to do. Any kind of like, not pronation, supination with this arm, or no, pronation, sorry, sup, pro. Really, really tender. If I flap my hands, like this hurts really intensely. If I twist my hands, that hurts. Oh, that's really tender right there. Any flexing is okay right now. That's a big stretch. That feels nice. That also feels really nice. If I were to add overpressure, then I get pain
right here.
So fast forward, I was still having this wrist pain. I was still having issues. And then COVID hit. And due to government restrictions, massage was not allowed. So I had now all this downtime, all this time off. I was technically laid off. I technically could rest and ice and not use my wrist. And instead, I decided to do a yoga challenge with my friend. We followed Yoga by Adrienne. She's wonderful. 10 out of 10. Check her out. Free on YouTube. Great. Wonderful. But if you guys know anything about yoga, it's very wrist intensive. There's a lot of down dogs, there's lots of balancing, there's a lot of just like pushing yourself up. I was, previous to COVID, very active in volleyball, but that was very stabilized. That was very like specific wrist lock movements. You know, you're doing a bit of snapping, but it wasn't ever anything where it was like, ooh, I'm scared this is gonna hurt me. Yoga, I was constantly having to compensate. I was constantly having to adjust. I wrapped my wrists. I was having a lot of pain and issue. Hi, Evie. Evie also wanted to come and say, yes, mom had some ouch in her wrist. So I realized that this was not normal pain. I was having a lot of issue lifting things, pinching, pulling, pushing, doing every activity possible. And I went and got imaged again, where I was diagnosed with a reoccurrence of my bone tumor. And the tumor was sizably larger this time. And it was in the same place. It was still in my radius. And I had a meltdown. I had a bit of a cry. I had a really, really bad time with that. And because of when I got things diagnosed, it was coming up to the holidays. I was diagnosed on December 3rd. And usually with most surgeries, they try to get you in pretty quickly. And because of Christmas, because of New Year's, because of the holidays, I had such a hard time getting into the clinic, getting to see anybody because of COVID, also because of holiday hours. So it was very stressful. And I think I grew a few more gray hairs just from those experiences. And it was not a fun time. But with this diagnosis came a couple of options. It was going to have to be a fibular transplant. So what that means is they were going to take the head of a fibula and put it where my diseased radius was. So they would fully remove this gross, nasty radius, which not ideal, but I understood why it had to be a thing. The fibula has very similar bony plateaus and attachment points to the head of a radius. So the idea and the hope was that if we did a vascular transplant, which means they would take the blood supply of that fibula and put it into my wrist, it would heal up. I would be able to bend relatively well. I wouldn't have full range of motion, but I would be able to move the joint. The other option was a non-vascular transplant where they would have to do a total fusion of the wrist, which means I would not have any motion, any deviations, any range at all in that joint. And that is what ended up having to happen. I went for a CT scan the day before I was scheduled for surgery. I was rotating between like 3 different hospitals. It was insane. So I had to go for the CT scan for an angiogram where they test your blood vessels and see if you have any clots or any issues. And the original idea was they were going to take my fibula and put my fibula into my wrist. So I wasn't having 1 surgery, but 2. This made me highly uncomfortable. I was not okay with the idea of having a leg surgery. I didn't know if I'd be able to do stairs. I didn't know if I'd be able to, stand comfortably, walk. Like, I didn't know what I was going to have. And I was very stressed. I was way less stressed about the wrist because I'd already had that surgery before. In my head, I was like, oh, I already know what to expect. This is going to be fine. The leg, no idea, not comfortable. So long story short, went for the CT scan and the doctor, my surgeon, came up to me and said, you won't believe it. That's not what you want to hear from your surgeon, and guess what? I didn't have the blood vessels necessary in my legs to do a vascular transplant. You're supposed to have 3 blood vessels in your lower legs, and I only have 1 in each leg. So it's a great thing that they tested that with the CT, because otherwise, if they had done the vascular transfer, I would have needed a foot amputation because I wouldn't have had a blood supply to my lower leg and foot. Thanks, modern medicine. So that left me open to only having the non-vascular transplant, which meant we were going to do a total fusion of the wrist. This led to an existential crisis, a meltdown. My surgery was scheduled for like 10 days after the imaging. So I had to tell my boss. She was very lovely about it. She was wonderful. She was very supportive. And, you know, if I couldn't massage, I always had a place back with her to, you know, work in the clinic, things like that, do whatever I can do. So I had some security there. I also had a lot of support from my husband and my family. Everybody was very lovely. My friends were very lovely. All of my close girlfriends are massage therapists at this moment too. But, you know, the sympathy was really, really helpful actually. I was worried that I would feel very pitied and, you know, I wouldn't have a good time, but it was nice to know that other people were rooting for me and other people could kind of understand how crappy the situation was. So January 12th comes, and this is the day of my surgery. And we had to go in at, I think it was 6 in the morning. My surgery was at 7:30. So, you know, it was what it was. Went in for surgery, went under. I did get to see the fibula before they put it in. And it was one long bone. They cut it down to size. And I looked over when I'm on the operating bed, like it wheeled into the room of surgery. And the nurses are all unpacking all the tools and sanitizing everything. And I look over and she's got this freaking shrink wrapped bone. And I look at her and I'm like, oh, is that my fibula? And she's like, oh God, she's seen it. Like, she's not going to be okay. I'm like, can I look at it? My anesthesiologist was like, no. You're looking at me. Look at me. We're putting you under right now. Because I was having some panic issues and I was like, just focus on something. So long story short, I wake up. I had an awful time with anesthesia. It was not a good time. I was very sick. I was nauseous. I was throwing up every time I sat up. I spent a night in the hospital and got to leave the next morning, which was lovely. I had to take all the hardcore drugs. I had this huge splint and cast looking kind of splint, and recovery sucks, man. Like, I couldn't move my fingers at all. Because I had the total fusion, I had a plate put in with 10 screws. Sorry, you can't even see this. So I had a plate put in from here to here and 10 screws along that length, and the replacement of the radius with the fibular head, and 3 of my carpals removed. I think only 3 of my carpals. I found that out on a follow-up appointment with my surgeon. And I asked him, can I have them? Do you still have them? Where are they? Can I have them? The morbid part of my brain was like, those would be cool little pieces to talk about, hey? No, but they didn't give me my bones back, unfortunately. So yeah, anyways, so I had this splint, recovery sucked. And because I was having all this time off, I was like, what am I going to do? So I bought an MMO mouse and I played World of Warcraft and pressed shift with my entire hand because I couldn't move my fingers. So I have this lovely Corsair MMO mouse. I'm going to make a video about it and why I have chosen to stick with it even post-surgery, even with all of my mobility. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, that was what happened to my wrist. And like I said, recovery sucks. I am still going to physio once a week. I am still working on grip strength. The last time we checked, this hand had 26 kilos of grip strength, and this hand had 6 kilos of grip strength. And they do expect a bit of a deviation, but not to that extent. So I can no longer bend my wrist. I will never be able to bend it. I can move my fingers. I can rotate somewhat, and I will not be able to deviate the wrist, you know? So I'm quite limited now. Yoga, it was a good time. Not for me anymore, apparently. Push-ups, they're gonna have to be locked wrist push-ups. Lots and lots and lots of changes in my life, but nothing that has really been crazy. I still grieve my mobility. I still grieve, you know, being able to comfortably scratch my back because I can't do that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I can't do now, but at the end of the day, I'm currently really, really grateful for catching it as early as I did, because the chances of me breaking my wrist were really high because it was so hollowed out. And also, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that it has presented me. I know that sounds really weird and kind of convoluted because I had to quit my job. I had to quit and retire being a massage therapist, and I loved that job, and I loved my patients, and I loved my boss and my coworkers and the whole atmosphere. I felt really important and like I was doing something important for the world and helping people and relieving their pain. But I had to quit because I can't massage anymore. Maybe in the future I could, but I don't know if that's something I'm going to want to do. So I turned to streaming. And especially with COVID, I'm an extroverted person. So having people to talk to and having people to play games with and to connect with has really, really helped my mental state as well as with my recovery, because the dexterity for WASD, the dexterity with using a controller, the thumb movement that is necessary, I couldn't lift my thumb post surgery. They told me, okay, hitchhike. And I was like, eh. They were like, oh, are you trying? And I'm like, yes, I am trying. So the mobility and accessibility of gaming has really helped me quite a bit, I think, with my recovery. There are some days where I'm locked in a claw grip playing Bloodborne for 6 hours where I'm like, oh, this isn't healthy. I should stretch. But for the most part, it's been very helpful. So honestly, this transition in my life, I feel, has been easier than it could have been. I feel like I really could have fallen into a very, very bad place, and I've been very lucky to not have had that happen. But that's what happened to my wrist. So if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. You can also catch me over on Twitch at Kate_plays, and I'm there 5 to 6 days a week right now. Like I said, extroverted. But I've really been loving streaming, so I would love to see you, love for you to say hi, all of that good stuff. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want, please share it. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.